website, www.eeoc.gov, and that can be helpful if people want to send in a charge that way, and we'll process those as well. But if people want to speak to an investigator, then they should come in Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock.
Thank you very much. I just want to talk very, very briefly about California law. We also have an Equal Pay Act in California. It's Labor Code 1197.5. And we also have a Fair Employment and Housing Act, which is a lot like the federal Title VII. And the State Equal Pay Act is pretty much exactly the same as the federal one. You don't need necessarily to show intent. There's no minimum employees. The one thing about the state law, the Fair Employment and Housing Act, is that you only need 5 employees instead of 15. So there is a difference. There's another thing we have in California, which is it's Labor Code 1199, and it actually gives criminal penalties for violation of 1197.5. So if an employer doesn't pay a person of the opposite sex equally, and they're doing the same job, and it requires equal effort responsibility, there's a fine of up to $10,000 and up to 6 months imprisonment, and it has to be willful, of course. And it's not only if you don't pay equally, but if you demote the man instead of raising the woman's salary or wages, the DA can also go after the employer, and that does happen. And so, but to be imprisoned, you need to have done this more than once. If you just do it one time, you get the fine. Okay? And what Joan talked about in terms of the filing with the retaliation unit, did you have anything to add, or is it?
It's the statute of limitations is different. It's 2 years and 3 years. It can come in as an individual complaint, sex-based wage discrimination. It's the same form that we use for the other statute violations as a retaliation complaint. I left some materials about that out on the table out in front. So if you have any questions, I'll leave my business card with Ruth to you. Feel free to give me a call.
Thank you. We also have here present Marlene Massetti, who's the DFEH District Administrator, who can tell us the procedure for filing a sex discrimination claim.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here today. We have a local office here right now on North First Street. I've left quite a bit of information out in the front. Similar to EEOC, in fact, we have a dual filing arrangement with them agreement. If someone comes into the office and we find that the EEOC also has jurisdiction over the complaint, we will take the complaint and dual file it with the EEOC, and conversely, they'll do the same. As mentioned, we have a 1-year statute of limitations. It's very important for people to get in before that date. We are covered by 5 or more employees. There's 5 or more employees in California that's covered. For sexual harassment, it's only 1. I know we're talking about pay today. I'd like to reiterate how difficult those are to prove, and we're always challenged by that. So we also have, in regards to our cases, not only individual complaints, but we have a special investigation unit for class action cases. You can go online, just as with the EOC. We're at www.dfeh.ca.california.gov, and that information is out there as well. We have many, many complaints involving gender, involving women. Sexual harassment continues to be a large category. We're seeing, as you mentioned, issues with women in terms of pregnancy leave, discrimination, and also CFRA. You can get our complaint forms online. Most all of our investigations now, or I should say our interviews, they're done by phone. So it's very easy for people just to go online, make an appointment, or call our 1-800 number. That card's out there as well in front. And you would be interviewed, and once the complaint is taken for investigation, if we find a violation, the legal department's involved in that point. And there are a number of remedies available under Fair Employment Housing are quite extensive. they're available to the complainants. So if you have any other questions, feel free to give us a call, and I've left my business card out there as well.
I just want to also introduce someone that you should know about, and she is Maria Jackson of the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division. And she also takes claims not only for wage and hour, which isn't what we're talking about today, but also Family and Medical Leave Act claims, which I'm going to talk about briefly. And this is the federal counterpart to the Labor Commission in California, and it's 2 blocks down that Joan Healy was talking about.
I've never met Joan because I just transferred about a year and a half ago to Birmingham, Alabama, so I'm trying to find my way with all the individuals that I need to contact, but I know I'll be talking to you soon. Okay, just very quickly, the Wage and Hour Division likes to make sure that if the employees work, they get paid for that work that they have performed. When we file complaints, when someone wants to file a complaint with our agency, normally the process is for the complainant to have the employer's name, the allegation. We'll take the employee's information as well. We do conduct these investigations anonymously. There's no reason for us to disclose anyone's name unless we go into court. But normally what we need from you, like I said, is the employer's information, your information, the allegation dealing with wages. And if you need to file a complaint, you don't have to be actively working for that particular employer. But you can file a complaint by walking into our office on Market Street, 60 South Market Street, Suite 420, we're neighbors with OFCCP. You can also file your complaint through the 1-800 number, which is 1-866-487-9243. Or you can call our office, and we can also take your complaint by phone, which is 408-291-7730. One of our investigators will then screen your particular complaint. Or you can visit our website at www.wagehours.dol.gov. And we're normally open from 8:30 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. Okay.
Thank you. Finally, I'd like to introduce Hee-Jung Atkins, who's the director of the OFCCP here in San Jose, and she will speak briefly about the procedure for filing claims, and these are claims that involve federal contractors.
OFCCP has, we investigate possible wage discrimination issues against federal contractors and subcontractors through compliance evaluations and also through complaints filed by individuals. An individual can file a complaint if the allegation occurred within the past 180 days. The employer is a contractor or federal subcontractor. Also, because of our memorandum of understanding with the EEOC, sex-based wage allegations will be investigated by OFCCP if there's a class of women involved, which means 2 or more women, or if there's discrimination on a systemic basis, if there's a pattern or practice of discrimination, in other words. A complaint form will have to be filled out. This form can be found on our website. It's called a CC4 form. And once that's filled out, anybody could drop it off at any OFCCP office, or it could be mailed in, faxed in, and then the compliance officer will conduct an investigation to make sure that we do have jurisdiction to come forward.
I'm going to hang on to the microphone. Thank you to Ruth and all of the experts in the room, and I know you probably don't like that title, but for most of us here, that you really are a lifeline and a local resource that we're very happy to have. Do we need to hold the mic closer to our voices? Okay, thank you. I think in an ideal world, we would love to be able to, when these problems surface, to be able to work directly with the employer and to have them respond to the complaints, and to really look at, what are we doing as an organization, and we don't have that world, but sort of to give us a perspective from what can employers do. We have a guest with us today, Dan Kwong, who is the Vice President of Legal and Audit Support Services with the Biddle Consulting Group. And Dan specializes in test development, validation, and litigation support as they relate to employment selection, testing, and measurement. So Dan, can you help us understand how is it that we can catch pay discrimination or remedy past practices?
Basically, what I'm going to try and cover is typically like 45 to 40 minutes worth of material that I give in lectures. And we're going to try and ram it in about 10 minutes. Okay, so it's going to go a little fast. Hang in there, it'll make sense, and if it doesn't, we can talk about it afterwards, okay? And I'm sure I'll be monitored very closely. Next slide, please. Basically, I just want to share with you guys like a really quick background in terms of where I'm coming from, is that my training is in pure science, okay? I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. I swim in data, I love data, that's my thing. So and we can get into it later, but it's like, that for me is like the closest way that I come to not having to work in a lab, but yet at the same time, find the truth, okay? Because data for me, through proper modeling, actually allows me to find the truth. And so having had experience in both defense work and also plaintiff-oriented work, okay, I love it when the opposing experts present a particular argument and I can drill down the data, I'm like, I got you. All right? I love that. There's nothing better than that, nothing more satisfying than actually being on the opposing side and knowing that someone else on the other side is trying to obfuscate and trying to lie. Okay. So anyways, that's what gets me going in life, and actually I love it. I cannot have enough of it. And so from that experience, I want to share with you guys some of the things that I've noticed through the years, okay? And the thesis of the talk is going to be starting salary, all right? That, I think, is something that is missing in a lot of people's, I think psyche is the word, okay? Because a lot of times when people bring compensation-related charges, they typically think about, well, okay, what is a snapshot pay right now as of 12/31, say 2010? Okay, that's typical, all right? Or the at issue date. What is it of the pay for the at issue date? Okay. The thing is that, from my experience, a lot of the problem actually, you can find the problem actually not even there, but it started years ago in your starting salary. And I want to bring our attention to, and focus our attention actually to starting salary. So let's have the next slide. Okay. I've had the benefit of swimming in a lot of longitudinal data, a lot of them even dating back into the 80s, and some of them, if they dredge it up on tapes and cards, it actually goes back to the 70s. Okay, and I can tell you that the obvious that everyone knows is women generally are paid less than men. Okay, and what's actually more surprising is that you figure that there's a lot of talk about the gap closing through the years. What's actually surprising is that even in the cases that I've dealt with in the last 5 years, that gap is not really that small. It's actually quite prevalent. It's actually quite big. Okay, and it's a function of the industry that you're in. Certain ones actually, the starting salary for women are actually more than men for the simple reason that they're more progressive. I think they're more progressive, and I think they also do that to attract and try and retain women into the work. Okay, so why don't we have the next slide? All right, I love graphs because it helps me communicate all the numbers and stuff into something that's meaningful. Okay, and this is one of those that I see almost all the time the moment I get my hands on a company's data. Okay, let's look at this really quickly. Can you guys distinguish the difference between the red and the blue?
Yes.
Okay. Here being that females are in the red and then the males are in the blue. What you can see is that what I've done in this analysis is that I've split up, okay, into what we call quintile analyses. Split up into 5 different pay groups. Okay, ignoring job title. Ignoring job title, all we're doing is just splitting people up into 5 different pay groups. What's the most obvious thing that you see here? Anybody shout?
Women's going down, men going up.
That's exactly it. Women tend to be in lower paying position, while men tend to be in higher paying position. Okay, this, I can assure you, if you ever get your hands on any type of employee or any company data that's sufficiently large, about 500 or so, you're going to see this. You're going to see this very, very typically, okay? And so what I But this in and of itself, okay, is not evidence of discrimination. Typically, we do another layer of drill down, is to see, well, okay, how many it's an issue of availability, okay? Are all the positions up here where there is a relevant labor market, are they being filled by women? And so that's what I typically tell people, okay? That even though you see this is the one that actually gets a lot of CEOs' attention. Because this is probably the first time they're actually hearing it from someone who's analyzing the data. It's like, wow, okay, I'm not doing well. Okay. And I love going into boardrooms and like splashing this because seldom do I not get this. It's so prevalent. Okay. Next slide, please. But I want to keep our focus on the topic of starting salary, and that's just tangentially related. Why is starting salary so important? Okay. Think about savings in your bank. Okay. It compounds annually and it compounds exponentially. Guess what's happening with pay? It's the same thing. Okay. It's not a linear growth. So what happens with time actually is that the difference that started off really tiny back there, guess what happens over here? It becomes a really, really big difference. Okay. So with time, actually, it actually kind of intensifies and actually magnifies the problem. All right. This is another thing that I typically think that a lot of people, when they're the swinging compensation, they don't really have too much of an appreciation of. It's like small differences in starting salary has a huge effect. Even in this, what I did was that I did a 20-year simulation. Okay, and this was, I won't get into numbers, but it deals with the severity, where this is just a $1 difference all the way up to a difference of 23 cents, which is the topic of our presentation today, right? 77 cents to the dollar. And so that's the gap that you're going to see next slide. So how does that translate to in real dollar value, okay? For $15 an hour job, the gap initially may be $3.45, but in 20 years, it's $8.72. It grows exponentially, okay? It's a huge difference. And as the pay increases, this magnification, guess what? Gets bigger. Okay, next slide. All right. So a lot of times what I typically find is that employers, they try and be really good, okay? They do things that are proactive. So what I find is when I go in there, I do the most obvious thing. I say, hey, okay, so let's take a look at the difference between men and women, okay? The left being male, the right being female. Guess who's being paid less? This is pretty obvious, right? So what happens is they're thinking, oh gosh, okay, you know what? I mean, this is very, very corporate. This is very corporate America type of an attitude, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to remedy this. Okay, I'm going to start paying a little more and blah blah blah. And next slide, they get themselves into more trouble. So this is where I need to come in as an expert with compensation, and this is where I need to tell the companies, like, do not do this alone. Do this with help. Okay? Because what ends up happening is that in their efforts to try and equal the pay, a lot of times what ends up happening is that they are not taking into consideration other explanatory factors like education, training, time in company, other explanatory factors that go into loading into the prediction of pay. Okay? So what ends up happening is that you get an interaction. Let's not use a technical word. The simple concept of this is that it ends up that in a period between year 1 and year 5, okay, when you're not properly adjusting pay, statistically adjusting pay, controlling for the explanatory variables or the job-related factors, okay, the pay for women can actually overshoot the men, and it ends up being a separate problem. And I see this more often than you can actually believe in very well-meaning proactive companies. Okay, and this is the part where I feel really bad for them, right? And then they're like, well, now we're in a pickle. I mean, the women hate us, and now the guys hate us too. And so my advice typically is that if you're going to make any type of pay adjustments, okay, get help. If you don't know what you're doing in terms of analyzing and controlling for the explanatory variables or the job-related factors? Okay, good. All right, then you need someone to come in and help you make those proper adjustments. So next slide, please. All right, so what can be done? Proactive analysis, I advocate for that. If you don't know if there's a problem, if you don't know that there's a tumor, you can't treat the cancer. That's how I typically think about it. You need to just start with that. Oh geez, okay. Let's see. Let's move on to the next slide. This is the silver bullet. I don't want to say this, but it comes pretty close. I don't want to just talk. I want to take 10 seconds talking and sharing with you a story about myself, okay, about starting salaries. I remember about, not to date myself, but 20 plus years ago, I graduated from Cal, and I was looking for my first job, okay? And I remember I got a pretty measly little job offer. And what was interesting was that I shared that with my mom, and then I asked her, I'm like, well, you know what? I think I deserve more money. Actually, I think I deserve more than that, and I'm going to negotiate, right? But then, it's like we're an immigrant family. Okay, we came to the States. I wasn't born here, and so we're very collectivist, very socialist type of upbringing. And someone's like, no, don't do that. That's being rude. You're being very rude. It's like if they want to offer you that, then you have to take it. That's the starting salary. You have to take it. I'm like, oh, okay, Mom. I guess so. And so it's like I want to share with you that for the simple reason that I think that leads to a lot of difference in starting salary, because I was not as aggressive as say some of my colleagues who negotiated for a lot more pay than I did, and I just went into it and just took it. Okay, and so obviously I know better now, and I'm going to negotiate, but up until that point, it's like I was very timid. I was not as aggressive, and so I truly do believe that there is a social pressure for that. And this is the solution, okay? This is what I try and tell companies to do. Structure your starting salary, okay? Make no room for negotiation, okay? And all companies should agree on this across the board, all right? So there's no point in negotiation saying like my last job was whatever, I need 10% more and all this sort of stuff. Lock it. Okay, do a benchmark study, lock it, and then what you do is that you give it a 5 or 10% buffer for job-related features, okay? And how do you identify that 5 or 10%? You do a job analysis. You identify the necessary attributes, okay, that are worth paying a little bit more for. But again, you're only within a 5 or 10% kind of. Does this make sense? I know I'm speeding by really fast, but I know that I'm going to be sat down in a second. So anyways, okay, next slide. So what I've done here is that I've created a generic form, okay, so we can just click the buttons. This is for Jane Smith, and this is for the position of accountant for a commercial bank, right? And so it's really simple. So you start off with like a base salary of like 45K. And then with every additional factor that this person may have, you check it, and then you give them a 1x or a 2.5x or a 3.5x up, and you tally it up, okay? Guess what this does? This takes everything away, exactly. It takes everything away from the person who's more aggressive about negotiating, and at the same time, it would have helped me, the person who was much more timid to negotiate, right? Because it would have guaranteed me, it's a structured starting salary. And so it would have ensured that I would have been paid what I was owed. And, okay, that's it. I'm running out of time.
Thank you very much, Dan. So what can we do collectively? We're going to move into the final part of our program today and just very quickly go over 3 strategies that we've identified in terms of what we can do together as a group of people who are interested in this issue. One is recruitment and retention of women in non-traditional careers, and really looking at that here in our community. Advocacy for policy and legislation, and addressing attitudes and gender bias in the workplace. So with regard to the first strategy, recruitment and retention of women in non-traditional careers, Meg, what can you share with us about what are some of the things that we can undertake?
Well, I think it's really important to understand what legal frameworks that we have will and won't do for us. We've lost a lot of power to use legal frameworks to address gender segregation in employment categories. The post-prop 209, it's not just the issue of the ability to use affirmative action remedies in a situation where you have systemic segregation of the industry as you do in construction, but you also have also weakened all the other kinds of support mechanisms that could help deal with that. So you can't, so the issue, it's difficult to do differential outreach, even though you need to do differential outreach to reach clearly a group of people, in this case women, who don't know about the opportunities in construction or in other non-traditional crafts. I think it's okay for me to talk about construction, because if you go to the Women's Bureau website and you look at the non-traditional trades, don't start at the top. You know, they list all the job selections with less than 25%. Go to the bottom, and you'll see why I'm talking about construction. Because you start with plumbers, boilermakers. I mean, you know, then you're talking about basis points, you know, less than 1%. And then you might get into electricians, and it bounces around from year to year, but it's between 1% and 2%. Plumbers, laborers, you get up to 3%, and then you're pretty much done with construction. You move up, firefighting, 5%. Cops, security now is almost 15%. There you have a structure where you can actually, where we're reaping some benefit from the public employment sector, or where you have really large, when you have really large employers, it's easier to deal with these kinds of issues. But the issue of outreach is really important. And in some of these non-traditional careers that do not require college degrees, they have been completely disfavored, for men as well as women. But that has cut against women a lot more when the pay and opportunity is really there, and women can really support families in these careers, and they're not given it. So just make a bald-faced plug. We at Tradeswomen Inc. work with the state building and construction trades to sponsor yearly, the only one of its kind, a Women Building California, a women's conference for women in construction throughout the state, and it will be held in Oakland, California, April 30th and May 1st. And we expect over 500 women, and this year the National Building Trades has recognized that this is our 10th anniversary. They are also coming forward to bring a national perspective, partly in recognition that we are the only state that has this multi-craft statewide event. So watch, you know, coming to our website, and information is available on our website and on the website of the State Building and Construction Trades. We also